Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Liz D'Alto here, creator of Wild Soul Movement and your host for Untamed the Wild Soul Woman. Welcome back. I am so excited to continue this interview series with you where you get to just witness conversations with women who are so brave and so amazing, basically saying no to everything and how it's done, and yes to tuning into themselves, doing it their own way, and transcending their personal fears and struggles. So today I have a very dear friend of mine, Mrs. Foxy Pickett. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm so freaking excited to have you here. Foxy, so you all know, has been someone in my life who really has supported me over the course of creating Wild Soul Movement and really stepping into my own wildness, because as you can see, she's just about as wild as they get. And, you know, there's a beautiful bio. You can read her bio on the interview page, but I just want to tell you what I love about her. So she does shamanic work. By the time this interview airs, her wild playground, her virtual online playground where she does her shamanic work that involves animal totem readings, astrology, and all kinds of other magical things to really help you go in and get to know yourself and learn how to navigate literally the wild playground that is your life. And having her as a personal friend is literally just like having this amazing resource in my back pocket. I love the way she lives her life. I love the way she does her relationship. She's also a mom. Her son is one of my favorite little children on the planet. Their home is just a really beautiful place to go and explore and be. And you're all going to see exactly why shortly. So
thank you. Oh my gosh. I'm like, that's me? Wow.
Okay, it's you, awesome. Girl. So I've already told people why I think you're powerful and inspiring. Here's my opening question that I am asking every single woman. What do you love about being a woman?
Pleasure. We have an innate ability to access and appreciate and feel it like no other animal, like no other gender. We have this immense capacity for giving it, for receiving it, for transmuting it, you know, from pain to pleasure and the whole spectrum. We have this immense capacity for it in our hearts and in our bodies and our vaginas everywhere. And it's wild and beautiful and raw. And when we tap into that place as women, we're unstoppable. And there's nothing like that. You know, there's nothing like that out there. So I would say that's my absolute favorite thing about being a woman, because it feels so good sometimes.
Now, so because I know you personally, I know that you have very great access to your own pleasure. And I also know that it was not always that way. Mm-mm. So I'm sure so many women watching this or have just heard what you said and gone, how do I access my pleasure? So what was your journey? When did you realize that accessing your pleasure was actually this amazing, like life-affirming, altering, opening, creating pathway for you?
When I was tired of living a life that was varying shades of gray, and I was beyond depressed, I was completely apathetic. And so I went through my latter 20s, and actually most of that entire decade, just pretty much tuned out from myself and tuned out from my pleasure, was not very sexually expressed, didn't have very much fun, married my college sweetheart, and worked very hard at creating a life that I thought would make me feel better, which included having the wardrobe from Nordstrom's and having a house by the beach and getting my dream golden retriever and having this perfect golden-haired little baby and, you know, having a good career, making tons of money, and all those things left me feeling more and more empty. And I knew that there was something drastically wrong. And I'm the kind of person that it's not acceptable to me at a certain point to continue living that tuned out and to just be fine. and there was a breaking point one day where I was on Skype with a girlfriend and she was like, "How are you?" And I was like, just about to hear the words, "I'm fine," come out of my mouth, which I know every woman has said 1,000 times and not meant it. And for some reason that day, I was like, I'm not good, and I just started crying and we started talking about why that was. And it ended up coming down to so many of the choices that I was making being completely antithetical to who I really am. And one of those choices was how I was and who I was in that relationship with. So I decided to do some pretty radical things with my first marriage, including opening it. And that was an experience all in of itself. But it led me down this wild path, and I really started to access this forbidden side of myself. And once we all cross that bridge, however that bridge looks like, because there's something each one of us is not allowing ourselves to experience, to have, to be. Once I stepped across that chasm and realized the only one who's preventing me from feeling these things is me and my own choices, the whole gates opened. And so, no, I didn't always feel this way. But because I crossed that chasm and went into some very dark places and looked at some hard questions about how I was living my life, then I was able to develop that capacity for pleasure and joy. And now my life feels like it looks like it must. I mean, it's incredible.
I love this a lot. And as you're speaking, I was typing in a few questions that I have to ask you. I want to know, because I think a lot of women, there's always this phase where you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you were probably operating for years, not even realizing that anything was wrong, because again, you were fitting into the box, right? You had the job, you had all the things that you described. And then at a certain point, it just became too much and you were like, oh, I don't feel good. So many people can relate to that. What did tuned out? You said you were tuned out. What did that look like for you? What were some of the behaviors? And I asked this question very specifically because if you're watching this and she says something and you do it, I want you to be able to know, hey, this is a red flag. Maybe I'm not present for my life right now. What were some of the ways in which that you were tuned out, that you're not anymore?
Yeah. One of the first signs to me was a complete lack of interest in having sex. Oh. And just not being motivated, doing it, acquiescing to that because you're like, oh, I should probably have sex with my boyfriend, like, bleh, yay. And then I'll be like, pretend that it feels really good, and then it's over with. And so if you're faking orgasms, that's something to look at, right? Yeah. Because you want to feel like you actually feel that way, for one thing. And you also don't want hard questions coming at you from your partner. You don't want them to feel bad. Those are all indicators that you're out of alignment with something going on in yourself and that you're tuned out to what the answer might be because it's scary. So I did that regularly for most of my early adulthood, most of my sexual experiences. I was a great actress. And the other thing that I noticed that was really, really strong is that I looked to how I looked on the outside to try to make me feel better. So that meant shopping for really nice clothes with money I didn't necessarily have. So I went into debt. I had all the right shoes, like the most amazing wardrobe, and I was very fit. My hair was like bleached blonde. I looked like California dream girl, and yet I was like, just this empty kind of pasted on smile. And you can see it in photos of me from several years ago. It's like, who is that girl? I mean, she doesn't even look like I look now at all. And not just for the absence of face paint and ears. Like there's more of a difference than that. So credit card debt, faking orgasms. I also questioned my sexuality because I was so uninterested in sex with men in general, and especially with my partner, that I thought maybe I'm not into men. Like that's a legitimate question. And I was really confused about that. Because growing up as a child, I was very sensually aware. I would have orgasms climbing the pole in the playground at school. Like, I was very much in tune with my pleasure. And then it disappeared. So I thought, well, maybe I'm just not directing it towards the right gender. Like, maybe that's what's going on. And so my way of figuring that out was not to go physically explore that, but I got a bunch of lesbian erotica, and I was reading it. And I was like, yeah, this just doesn't do it for me.
That's so great.
This is just not my thing, Like,
what a smart way to experiment, though. I like that.
Yeah, and there's good erotica out there in both, in all genres, I'm sure, but in both genres. And so I thought, if anything, like this would turn me on because the other erotica would turn me on, but no dice. So I was like, fuck. Well, if I don't, sorry for the swear words. Hopefully that's okay. Um, if that's not doing it for me, regular erotica does. That's well done. Uh-oh. Maybe I'm not with the right person, people, whatever. Ick, uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah.
And what actually topped me over the edge was realizing how much in Fantasyland I was preferring to live. I read Twilight about 5 years after everyone else did because I was like, if it's so popular, it's got to be crap, right? So I avoided reading it like the plague. And then I was bored, and I would sit at the side of my bed at like 2 a.m, like on the floor with a flashlight reading Twilight. Like, I hope no one finds out that I'm reading this. I'm like 29. I shouldn't be doing this. And so I was reading it, and there was so much magic in those books and such passion. Of course, like codependency and non-healthy relationship patterns too, but all this magic and passion and attraction and sexual tension. And I thought, yeah, my life has none of this, like zero. And that was a huge red flag. So living in Fantasyland, faking orgasms, getting into credit card debt, spending money on the external stuff.
Yeah.
Those are all pretty big indicators that something's off.
So this is already a huge theme in all of these interviews. At some point, there's like this moment where the woman realizes, I need to go in.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to find the things that make me happy out here.
No.
And one of the reasons why, I know you and I have had many conversations about this, is the culture that we live in. Like, what I love about you is you are like a total paradigm shifter. You said no to this culture, and even the way you live is some people would consider it really edgy, but it's so funny being around you. It's just who you are, and it's so amazing. So, it sounds like that was the breaking point. You realized this doesn't work for me. These shoulds. I have all of the things that culture told me I needed to have to feel good, and I don't. So you also talk about the shadow side. And this might even take up the rest of our conversation, maybe not. But I know you do a lot of private coaching, and so do I. And this comes up a lot in one-on-one conversations with women, and I'm sure men too. We fear the dark stuff. We only want to be the light. We only want to be like the happy, productive, the positive. But there's so much value in going into the dark side. So can you first explain, what is the shadow side? What does that even mean? And maybe some pointers how you went there, or how to go there, or even like ways that you teach your clients to do this.
Yeah. So the shadow side has a lot of faces. And for everybody, that face is going to look slightly different. So I can describe what mine has looked like and how I found it. Or them, I should say them, because there's numerous shadow sides that we each have. Just when you discover one and let it out, the others are like, oh, hello, it's a party down here.
Oh, there's more where that came from, girl.
Yeah. So my husband read aloud to one of the classes that we taught together this beautiful section on the shadow from this book called The Secret Teachings of Plants, which is an amazing book. And it's not just about like plant medicine. It's about connecting to your heart. And the analogy in that book is that your shadow side is all the pieces of yourself that you either outright rejected as you move through life, or that someone you loved or our society told you weren't okay. And those little pieces and shards of your being got put into a bag, a dark, dark, heavy bag that you are dragging behind you. And these pieces of yourself, which you do not want to look at because they're the ugliest, nastiest thoughts that you'll ever have, or pieces that you don't want to admit exist, they're dragging behind you like a 200-pound bag of rocks. And it isn't until you're willing to turn around, go to the bag, open it up, and look and see what's actually there, that you can start to actually heal yourself. It's not going to be necessarily all found in allopathic Western medicine that heals your sicknesses, or in energy healing that heals your energetic traumas. You have to be the one to go in and look at all these parts of yourself that you've said, this is too ugly and nasty to exist in me. Nope, I reject it. Not going to look at it. And so for me, all of my shadows started to really come out when I stopped looking outside, right? And I started going, what is it about me? Why have I made these choices in choosing a partner that's not a good reflection of who I am? That, I'm trying to put too much emphasis on this body that I have. What happens when it starts to break down? Like, I'm fucked if that's how I identify myself. Again, sorry for swearing. Passionate topic. So I started opening up the bag and looking at it. And when you're reaching for the shadow and getting a hold of it, when you feel like you're going to throw up, like you'd rather die than admit this about yourself, when it makes you cry so much that you're nauseated, when you lose sleep, when you want to sleep for 2 weeks, there's all these indicators that you're starting to get in touch with that dark side. And it's so important that we do have that courage to admit to ourselves, what is it we're really afraid of?
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, what is it, as you ask question after question after question to dig through the layers of this muck, at the root of it, why? Why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of being abandoned? Why? Are you afraid that you're not good enough? Why? Do you believe you're not worthy? Why? It's hard to ask those questions, and because the answers are awful oftentimes. It's like exposing all these wounds to the air, but that's the only way that they heal. They just fester if we keep bandaging them up.
Yeah. So wait, I need to interrupt you for a second because I just want to overemphasize that you said layers. And I think it's so important because also part of our culture, and even on a platform here like Entheos, where you all have access to classes and classes and classes by world-class teachers, coaches, leaders, speakers, all these amazing, amazing practitioners. The trap is that you need to consume all of the personal development and that you need to heal, and you needed it yesterday. And the thing is, it takes time. Yeah. This has also another repeating theme in many of these interviews is how much time it takes. So really, really quickly, and then I don't want you to lose your train of thought. How long? What was this process? How long was this process from realizing that this doesn't work for me to getting to more of your true self now? How long did that take you?
It started 5 years ago, like really in true depth, and I don't think it will ever stop.
Right. Yes.
The answer is you don't arrive. It's just there's not.
It's true.
There's not a place where you're amazingly going to feel like I'm fully integrated and whole, and I have figured this out. And whenever my shadows come up, I just love them. And like you might feel like that one day, and the next day be obliterated and totally T-boned by something that. Just like sends you off into Triggerville.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to the best of us because we're human.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be human. And experiencing continued exposure to your shadow side gives you contrast as you continue to reach farther and farther towards this higher version of yourself. We can't forget the lower version of ourselves. Like, both halves are so important. And it isn't that your higher self takes over. Your lower self just finds its match, and then you have balance. That's integration. It's not about ascending to some new place. It's about being present and accepting yourself in all of your shit and all of your glory at the same time. And there's nothing harder.
So hard. I literally had a moment last week, after I saw you actually, of what the most intense cry of my life. I was on the floor in the fetal position. Mike threw our comforter over me and it was just like laying behind me, holding on to me. And I thought I would cry forever. I didn't think it would ever stop. There was actually a moment, this is the only time in my life I ever thought I might die here on this floor, because that's how like deep and dark and intense it was. But the thing is, somewhere like I knew I wasn't going to die. And I made the choice. I'm like, keep crying because it was a release. So I would love to know in your super dark moments, I don't need to necessarily know what they were unless there's a specific one you want to share.
Yeah.
How did you stay with it? Because I think a lot of people might go, okay, let me look, and then go, let me put that back.
Yeah, oh my God, it's so overwhelming.
When it's so terrifying and overwhelming and painful, how do you stay with it?
Yeah.
And keep going?
I have help. I have help. And I think that that's the key, that this is an individual journey and it's your shadows that you need to get in touch with and work through and accept and, yes, ultimately love, but probably not in the hippie way. You know, but you need support in that process. And my chosen partner now, my husband, is an immensely powerful reflection of how far I've come in my journey. And he helps support those times where I feel completely either lost in that sadness or overwhelm or anger or defeat, depression, craziness, whatever it is that's coming up that's so much. He shows me the human capacity to hold that and to accept it and to love it. And by him just being strong and there with me, not trying to fix me, not trying to solve it for me, but just like being there, it gives me and reminds me that I have the strength to really face it instead of just shut it down and run away. Because that was definitely my ML before. It was like, you're making me uncomfortable, so I'm going to shut down and stop talking to you. That included myself.
Yeah.
So, that was the way that I would handle it before. And that's just not acceptable for the life that I now want to live. And he reminds me of that when I forget, and he's only able to do that because I can see and value these things in myself. Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be able to be with someone like that.
So even having come as far as you have, I love that you just said, when I forget. Yeah. None of us are on our game 24/7. It's just not the case. And we all know the term ebb and flow, but everyone just prefers to be in flow. And it's like, oh, screw that ebb, but it's a real thing and we all go there. What are some of the ebbs for you? What are some of your big triggers?
Jealousy. When I start to feel inadequate physically. Which happens, I can be a beautiful person and still see somebody else and be like, I just wish I had that. Or I wish I know in my heart that I'm not making time for X. Like yoga triggers me so much sometimes. Like, hate to admit that, but it's so true because I know that in my heart, I need to be doing more of something like that, but I am not choosing to do that. I'm not going to say I don't have the time. I'm not choosing to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm also 8.5 months pregnant. So it's like there's some physical limitations to what I can do right now. But I see that in other people and I see their choices and I see how it results in how their bodies present themselves and in how they inhabit life. And it makes me go, like, I want that, like I want that and I'm not that. And it's taking me outside of myself and it's not acknowledging what I do have and how beautiful I really am. And really, when we see beauty in others, it's only available to us because we can already see it in ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when I forget that, I have to remind myself of that and be like, okay. Like, A, you're getting triggered because you need to do it for yourself and you're not, or you need to make different choices. And B, you can only see it because that's what you already are.
Yes.
So just stop it. And that's a little conversation I'll have with myself.
That's great. And I love that it's something that you listening may notice isn't present there is she doesn't beat herself up. She observes the thought, the trigger, and then has the loving conversation with herself. And I think that's a step that many people probably need to practice skipping, right? The time wasted beating yourself up, because that just keeps you there instead of moving to the other place. So I'm so glad you mentioned being pregnant because it reminds me that I really wanted to ask you. I don't have kids. And one of the reasons I don't have kids is because it friggin' terrifies me. The idea of being responsible for another human's life. And fully knowing that many of us, our issues come from our parents, not even because we have terrible parents, even though some people have had some very traumatic upbringing and experiences, but just because, every generation is better than the last, right? Things just get handed down that we naturally are going to have to heal. But I love how you parent. I love witnessing you. I love seeing what's possible. And I want to give an example, and then I'm going to let you talk about it. So, for example, Foxy's son, Hudson, wanted to wear a tutu to school. And she put him on the bus. Was it purple? It was purple, yeah?
Bright purple.
How old is he? 4?
4.5.
4.5. She didn't say no. It was about creative expression and be who you are. And also, what I love that you didn't do is try to protect him from what might happen if you let him go to school like that. So I think just that example kind of shows how you parent.
Mm.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Because I remember asking you this. I remember asking you, you embody so well being true to yourself, and I know you're teaching that to your child. How do you deal with knowing that the kid has to go to school and be around all these kids who aren't being raised that way?
I deal with it because for whatever reason, when I was growing up, I was very much of the mindset that if I wasn't liked by my peers or they didn't get me, which frequently happened, I was pretty much a loner and an outcast, not by choice as a child, that it would add and will add to his journey of development, because it did for me. It didn't make me bitter. It didn't make me reject myself and change myself to compromise who I was in order to be popular or in order to have friends. I just learned that I was different and that I was going to be okay with that. And my mom was really amazing at saying, hey, someday there's going to be people who get you and accept you and love you. And we do that at home. I know that's probably not enough, but like someday you'll find your people. And, and then I totally lost myself in my 20s. And she was like, what happened to my daughter? Like, oh my God. But as I've come back to myself, I found that her wisdom is really true. And without those experiences when I was young of, for whatever reason, choosing to wear my different colored socks, to, just learn how to speak French at recess time instead of going out and dealing with playground bullshit, saying no to all the boys, like all the stuff that I did, which at the time was just like icky. I don't feel like doing that. It wasn't like a revolution for me. It was just like what I wanted to do. So whatever. But now I realize how revolutionary that really was. And I can see in my son these tendencies to push the button, to push the envelope, to walk in kind of uncomfortable territory for other people. He's perfectly at home there. So I'm like, good. You need to learn that not everybody's going to understand who you are, and you need to be able to find yourself amidst all that judgment and confusion and whatever you're going to face, because you're strong enough. I believe in you. If we try to save our kids from themselves, we give them the message they're not strong enough to handle it.
That's a really great point.
So that's what I really believe. And, there's little things that I can choose to support him in every day that bring him closer to that personal strength that he needs to find in himself. I can't give it to him, but I can certainly model it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. So we went on a tangent, and I want to come back to exploring the dark side. If someone is just like, okay, I'm willing, whether it's a resource, and actually Wild Playground is for sure a resource. I know that, your own program.
Yeah.
But how do you, first couple steps, how do people go in and even start exploring that space?
They have to get quiet. There has to be room for this conversation with yourself to happen, which most of us don't really have space for in our life right now. So it doesn't have to look like every morning at 5 a.m. you get up and listen to, your Buddhist gong music and meditate on a cushion and have this like serene acceptance and journey within. Like, it doesn't have to look like that. But I will say that shamanic journeying is very, very powerful for bringing up what's in your dark side. It's an unconscious journey, so you don't know what you're going to see there, but it often contains very powerful symbols of stuff that needs to emerge. A lot of it from the dark side, not always. And so shamanic journeying can be really helpful. You can do that on your own. There's tons of books about that. Michael Harner has a really good book called The Way of the Shaman. It's a really good intro to how to do that. I do it with my clients because it's helpful to have somebody who understands those metaphors and can interpret, like, this is what I think this means, and let's talk about that. If you're by yourself, it can get a little scary or overwhelming. But that's amazing. And then, really a very simple practice of maybe nature walks, or maybe it is meditation time. You really need to put yourself into the priority of your own life and schedule time for, like, this is me time. And whether it's shadow exploration, that's the intention, or whether it's nap time, something to really get rejuvenated in yourself so that you make yourself a priority is going to be the first step.
So if sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, finish your sentence.
I was going to say, because then when you do start to have the courage to start asking yourself, what is it that I really need to know right now? You know, when you start asking those questions, the answers will come, but you have to know how to be quiet enough to hear them.
So if someone doesn't even know what a shaman is and shamanic journeying, tell us what that means.
So a shaman has lots of definitions out there, but what I think that a shaman is someone who is comfortable navigating the unconscious, if we're going to talk in psychotherapy language, navigating the unconscious, navigating the shadow realms, as well as dealing with material reality, the world we live in, you know, which is not always full of magical stuff. You know, sometimes it's full of reality, like school buses and farts, you know, like that's.
I love your examples.
That's part of it, right? Especially in my world currently.
Yeah.
So a shaman can navigate all those places. They can navigate the divine, they can navigate the shadow, and they can navigate the middle world, the earth plane, you know, with ease, and understand what kinds of levels of their own consciousness they need to be in order to successfully be in all those realms. So they can connect with nature in a way that's different from your average person going on a hike. You know, they're going to see and feel things there because they're more tuned into the other levels of reality that exist simultaneously with the one that most of us are familiar with. So that's really what a shaman does. And a shamanic journey teaches you how to start navigating the different levels of reality within yourself. And that's key because you can see how much depth you have as a human, how much height and breadth you have as a human, what your capacities are, your own infiniteness. There's so much that shamanic work can teach you about limitlessness and how to get over your fears of things like death, which then puts you into a much different frame of reality as you're navigating life. It's much more present. It's like, I don't have to be afraid of the plane crashing because I know that I need to just be present for what's here right now. That's all I can do.
Yeah. Cool.
So, yeah.
So I know one of your primary modalities is animal medicine.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Actually, I want to know, because I might know this story, but I don't think everyone else does, and I don't even remember. How did you even figure out that you were a fox? Like, when was the fox born? When did it reveal itself to you?
What does the fox say?
Oh, God. I walked right into that one.
I got sent that like 53,000 times, as you can imagine, when that came out. It's actually my husband who saw the fox in me in some of the attire that I would choose to wear when we first got together. And he started calling me Le Fox because I speak French. So he was like, she's Le Fox. And I just, something about that finally clicked for me where I thought, maybe fox is one of my totems. Like, I hadn't done totemic studies at that point. This was like, 3.5, 4 years ago. And I was like, what is a fox totem? Like, what does this mean? And I just got that insight to go and look and start researching it. And as I was reading about this animal from an animal medicine perspective of what it brings to those who resonate with this animal, I thought, oh my God, like, this is powerful stuff. This shows me so much about myself that I had no idea I even had, much less how powerful something as simple as an animal could be as a metaphor and a teacher for me. And it was like a paradigm shift instantly in my head. And I learned very quickly that I've always been this way. And there was like probably 25 years of my life where I just totally forgot for various reasons. But when I think back to when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, animals would talk to me and I would be able to see animals and people and figure out like, ooh, that person looks like like a walrus or and it's not like they physically look like it. It's just, that's what it feels like to me. And so I started to see that. Once I saw it in myself, I could see it almost immediately in other people. And so I saw right away that my husband is a tiger. He has tiger energy. And then when I looked at what tiger medicine really is, totemically, I was like, oh my gosh, once again, just stunned at the resonance. And then it started from there as this kind of game that we would play with people in our families and our friends. And they'd be like, okay, so fox and tiger, like, what am I? What animal am I? I got that question so many times. And then my clients started to wonder, like, well, what animal am I? Like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And, it's interesting. People are always curious about themselves. And so that's how the animal medicine started to become part of my work expression, something I did not expect at all. Here I am doing coaching work, and then people are wanting to talk about what their animal is. And that to me was a huge, huge shift in the right direction for my own like business kind of evolution. Yeah. And I've looked to Fox now for how to be with my clients, for how to even what direction to face my desk in for successful hunting. I mean, the metaphors are ripe and they're nowhere else. You're not going to find love strategies and business strategies like this anywhere else because they don't exist. It's like, who's going to tell you to face your desk north? But for a fox, that might be a good idea.
I love this so much because, as an eternal student, I'm always reading. And, you and I, we originally met in a community for women entrepreneurs. And there's so many books on strategies, right? Follow these steps. And I think one of the most damaging things about that I definitely saw in fitness is when someone who is positioned as an expert is telling you do this, this, and this with this promise of an outcome, and you don't get that outcome, most people don't go, oh, that approach wasn't for me. They go, what's wrong with me?
I did that wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your approach says go in, experiment, journey, figure out your spirit, and then let that actually guide you into the steps.
Yeah.
So we're not saying you can't still read books or follow these things or try out this stuff, but it connects you to your nature.
Yes,
so you know when stuff is for you and when stuff is not. So what are some other tools in your shamanic toolbox? Because there's many, many, many available.
There's so many available. And really, once you tap into your own shamanic side, which every single person has. You don't have to be a shaman to benefit from this way of life. Mm-hmm. Certainly can be. I think that it's been a forbidden life path for a very long time, only available to the very elite chosen few, and only available to indigenous populations. And that's changing because it benefits our cultures to tap back into this wisdom and to reconnect with our natures as human and natures in general. Because then we create a more, coherent existence for everybody on this planet. And so for me, everything becomes a tool. I mean, literally, you can get wisdom from almost anything, and you are the primary tool. So your intention and focus is what creates that relationship. But I work with stones, and they're called the stone people. Like, these actually have little spirits in them that want to be worked with and connected with. That's why crystals work. With trees, with plants, with herbs. I mean, there's herbal medicine has been partnering with humans to create health ever since we emerged here on this planet. And that's what a lot of our modern pharmaceuticals are based on, right? But they're distilled essences rather than connecting with the plant itself and asking for spiritual help and guidance and wholeness being brought back to your body. And so these tools are all around us everywhere. There's tons of books and resources about that stuff. Of course, the animal medicine. And then I also look to astrology, and people laugh at astrology, or they think it's just about the daily horoscopes. And, if it doesn't apply to you, it's all bogus. But it's really not about that at all. It's about looking at the map of yourself. And what's going on outside is what's going on inside. And we know that on a more intimate level, when you see the reflection of yourself through other people. But the stars and planets also represent what's going on for us, especially psychologically. And so they provide amazing guidance as to what are your unique challenges in this life? How are some of the ways that you're naturally put together to handle certain situations? And then if you can connect the stars and your planets and your signs and all that stuff to something more grounded, like animal medicine, then you start to get a really whole picture of the universe inside of yourself. And that's what I've ended up learning and now teaching. And it's such powerful medicine.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's super amazing. So while you were saying all of that, this question might feel like it came out of left field, but I have to ask. And it's because, did you have any religious background growing up?
Methodist, of
cool.
course.
I don't know what that means, of course. I grew up Catholic.
Like Christian, Protestant.
Got it. Mm-hmm. So I asked that because I know a lot of people's resistance to many of the things we're talking about here is they have trouble reconciling it with God as they understand God.
Yeah.
And you mentioned spiritual. I mean, a lot of these conversations are around spirituality, are around energy and different types of things that are framed as medicine and healing. And I put that in quotes because a lot of people don't understand that, in fact, not only is it not in violation of anything that you believe in, but it can really
strengthen.
Thank you. Be complementary.
Yeah.
So what is your relationship, whatever you call it, to God, the divine, higher power, whatever it is you choose? Sure. Actually, what do you call it?
I don't even know what to call it, to be honest. I mean, I will say something like the universe, because it's kind of becoming an understood term for what we mean by the unspeakably divine.
Yes.
But it really is beyond the level of words.
Yeah.
And so when we try to limit it or label it, it puts it into a box. Even using the word the universe makes me feel like, oh my God, I just walked into a store full of incense and crystals. Which is totally great for me. But for somebody who's going to church every Sunday and has a really strong relationship with Jesus and God as they know it, that's going to be like, I don't get it. Why would this help me at all?
Yeah.
And so my relationship with my own sense of God or the universe is constantly evolving. It's changed a lot since I was little. But what I really believe now is that God is truly in everything. Mm-hmm. That we are all truly, beautifully, perfectly divine, even in our imperfections, pain, ugliness, mess, confusion, even the despair that's in the world. There's holiness there too. And when you are willing to see that, then you have a Jesus type of consciousness, Christ consciousness, where you can look past the surface of what you see going on in the world or going on across the table from you and just recognize the heartbeat that's in front of you, the person that's behind the person. And in that case, we don't need to agree about consciousness. We don't need to agree about religion. We don't need to agree about jihad, about violence, about racism. We just need to connect with each other and say, hey, we might not agree, but that doesn't mean that you're not worthy of being cared about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else is there to say? That's it. So that's what spirituality has become to me. It's this nameless force that is heartbeat to heartbeat.
I'm writing that down. It was so beautiful. Okay. So this is something that I think you do so well, which is keep it human. The term keep it real, you keep it human. Yeah. You and I have had this conversation too, how so many personal development, self-help, even spiritual teachers kind of crap on the human experience.
Yep.
And you said this well earlier. You said it's not about ascending. We're not gonna be Buddha. We're here on this earth. We're having these experiences. So, and I've been with you out in public when you guys are wearing your ears and your tails and your face paint. How do you face? Two-part question. So now it's a much stronger expression. But even as you were transitioning, how would you experience re-emerging after you've done some of this work into the world as the new you and dealing with family members, friends, even in the work world, where then it's not even that you aren't secure in who you are, but people's reactions to who you are and who you become can be a major deterrent. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's tricky. It's ugly. I think for most people who go through this kind of transformation, it's necessarily really sticky with the relationships that we've been in, whether that's with our families or our friends or our husbands or kids. It's all going to come apart and come back together again in a new way. And that might not be pretty, usually isn't. So my family really freaked out when I opened my marriage, when I went down a very unconventional path for a short time. And it was like, what are you doing? Oh my gosh. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I'm doing the same thing all of you did, but I'm talking about it, including to my husband. Like that's kind of the revolution. And so it was hard for me to not just say like, F you guys, I'm going to go my own way. And that's kind of what I did for a little while. And I think that to me, it's like a flamboyancy that happens when we come out as our true selves, where we have to be like huge about it. And it becomes this message and it's like, in your face. And if you don't agree, then off with you. And I think that's necessary because we have to break free from our old self.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of a violent process in one way or the other. For me, it was violently outrageous. I had this website that I was using swear words and hot pink and like was just like blatant, right, all over the place. And so my family and my old friends were like, what are you doing? Are people responding to this? They were more worried about me than anything else. Yeah. And I saw that. And I think I tended to get defensive at first, but as I started to get more and more secure with myself, I started to be more compassionate with how I would respond to their questions and concerns and more kind. And I think that started to settle things down a little bit because it wasn't feeling like they had to come up and defend against, their own concerns or their own thoughts. It was just like, okay, we're going to just be kind of on a different page here. Yeah. And the fallout was big. I mean, I probably lost all of my old friends, all of them. I left my marriage eventually and started a new life. And so most of the people who were in my old life who were friends with the old me couldn't or wouldn't keep up with the new me. It was just, not going to happen. And I really didn't grieve that too much because those friendships were only as deep as I was willing to go with myself, which wasn't very deep. So it wasn't like I lost a lot. Thankfully, I'm lucky. I've had clients where they've lost a lot more than that. Mm. And it's uncomfortable. But on the other side of that now, where I feel very secure about myself, very secure about what we're doing, not really feeling the need to go out and be like, look at me. I mean, even though these are, yes, like kind of overt, it's very playful. And so it doesn't feel like we're walking around with a billboard like, you must believe,
Right.
Like, just be yourself, whatever that looks like to you. This is how it looks to me. Doesn't mean I'm going to walk around saying, I want everybody to come and do this exact same thing.
That's such an important point, right? As you go on this journey, you go in and you literally try things on, take them off to decide what is and is not for me.
Yeah.
It is not your responsibility.
No, it's not.
To lead anyone else's journey, unless they ask, right? Like, I'm sure it's so amazing when people are curious and they come and they ask, but I have found people really have to do that on their own accord.
They do. Yeah, they do. And not everybody is willing or able to hear the whole truth either. And we hear a lot about being authentic. And people wonder, like, how authentic are you supposed to be? Are you supposed to be this raw, naked presence with every single person from the grocery checker to like, your mom, like how are we supposed to navigate this territory of authenticity? And in the shamanic world, we talk a lot about shape-shifting or being able to mold yourself. You don't lose your core essence, but being able to navigate different worlds, different territories, different situations with the right shape for your expression in that situation.
I love that.
So does that mean that if I was going to, for some reason, go out and interview for a job at a bank, that I would go with face paint and ears on? No. But does it mean that I compromise myself in the process? Not necessarily, because I know who that person is. And when you hold yourself as sacred and you're making decisions from that place, it doesn't matter what you're doing on the outside.
I love the inherent flexibility and that approach. Because I think so many people, they take a belief, they decide to be staunch about it, and many things become black and white.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to make it situational.
That's right. And it's all about trying to avoid becoming dogmatic.
Yes.
Because natural systems, if you look to nature as your guide, which the shamans would recommend, because that's who we are, nature is constantly in flux. And it's never at a perfect state of arrival either. So in nature, you go out of alignment, off course, get diseased, and it makes you stronger for it. You either die, decompose, and create new life, or your system learns how to adjust to the new conditions and you become wiser, stronger, faster, better, you evolve. So that's what's happening to us in our spiritual journey and our physical journey too. We're going to go kind of one of two directions. We're going to go towards death, or we're going to go towards an evolved, stronger life. Neither one is a problem.
Yeah. And I love it because it would be really easy for you to just like live this isolated life and be like, this is the way we do things and no one accepts me and blah, blah, blah. And it's not. So great.
It's very open. It's playful. People always ask me, why do you do this? And I'm like, depending on the person and what I can feel from them as far as their receptivity, the answer more often than not is life's more fun this way.
Yeah.
Because truly it is. And the responses I get now are like smiles, joyfulness. People are like, you must be doing that because it's fill in the blank, Mardi Gras, Halloween, your child. Like, there's always some nearby date where it's like, seems like it should be okay to do this. And we're just like, no, we do this every day because life's more fun. People are like, you could do that. Ooh, and I just wonder what happens when they go home and think about, what could I do to make my life more fun?
Yeah, it's so permission giving.
Yeah.
So great in that way. So I want to ask one more question. And again, it comes back to that part because it's scary to realize who you really are. Yep. And to risk losing everything you've ever known, from relationships to even like a wardrobe, right? We've talked about this.
Yep.
Getting rid of those clothes, all these external things that used to define you. It's kind of wild. It's very wild. So I think sometimes what happens, people hear someone like an expert, like yourself, and you're a coach, I'm a coach, and they're like, oh, easy for them. That's their job. Talk to me about how these things unfold for your clients, for women with children or people who have corporate jobs who are living very, for lack of a better term, I hate labeling things just as much as you do, but who live more traditional lifestyles. As they get in, how does this stuff unravel for them?
Messily. Mm-hmm. And confusingly, which is why they're here with a partner like you or I to nurture them through the process. I also find that based on how I am in my life and how I present myself in my business, which is completely unified, that a certain type of person is going to select themselves to work with me.
Yes.
So this is going to be the kind of person who's willing to get a little messy. They've read my blog posts. They've seen the pain I've been through because I share all of it. And they know then that they're going to have to be brave, that they're asked to grow courage in this process, and that I'm not going to save them from themselves. I'm a very kind mentor, but I'm also one who understands that we have so much more strength inside than we believe. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you that. I have to allow you to witness it in yourself as you get uncomfortable.
Yeah. We talked about this most recently too, right? We cannot rob people of the experience that they need to have.
That's right.
I was talking with a friend recently who said, man, no one is coming to save me.
Nope.
And that's kind of the crux of the work.
Yeah.
I think that we both do. And so this whole idea of untaming the wild soul woman, in your context, it's getting back to nature. Yeah. Literally nature, your animal nature outside, and letting these things inform you.
That's right. That's right. And it's hard for people. It's hard to make time. It's hard to accept the information that you're getting from yourself. It's like, oh my God, this is the biggest word that comes to me over and over again is this is inconvenient. Because once you start down this road, a whole host of literally inconvenient truths make themselves known to you, and they're too loud not to do something about, and It feels like barf. That's what it feels like. But you have to do it. It's like you have said this is important, and so you're asked to start answering those questions and face those truths. And that's why it's so helpful to have somebody on your side who's not going to judge you when you fuck up, fail, whatever you need to edit out of this conversation. Right. But whatever you're going through, even if you don't navigate it beautifully, you're in it, and that's commendable.
Yeah.
Like, even if you, quote unquote, go back to old patterns or whatever, you can't really do that. You're doing it from an evolved perspective.
Yeah.
So, there's no wrong way of going about this and experiencing a real life for yourself.
Yeah.
And that becomes clearer and clearer as I work with more people.
So great. So where do people find you? If they want to know more, if they want to work with you, if they want to check out the Wild Playground, or just know what their animal totem is?
Yeah, if you want to know what your animal totem is, you can get it in two places. One is going to be at forbiddenlife.com, which is my main website and my blog. And then wildplayground.com is my shamanic school. I call it the Totemic Arts Adventure, and it's an ongoing shamanic education with a whole lot of fun thrown into the mix. And that site is going to be finished when this goes live. So there'll be lots of good, juicy stuff at both places.
And it's so good. Again, I can't personally attest enough to how valuable, how meaningful, how deep and fantastic Foxy's work is. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was so freaking good. I hope those of you watching and listening have really, taken some notes, taken some ideas, and just understand. This is big, actually. Everything we talked about today is so big. You do not have to do it all at once.
You can't, so that's okay.
You can't even if you tried. But if one thing stood out to you, start there. So I will talk to you soon, and thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye.
Mwah. Bye.
Abundance is such a beautiful word. What is your definition? And when you say, I have the most abundant life of anyone I know, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah. For me, abundance really translates as flow. So it's just this idea of walking in the world and really believing that there's not only enough for me, but that believing in the concept and idea that there is enough for everyone.